Welcome to this edition of Thought to Action, brought to you by the Herb London Center for Policy Research. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, the president of the London Center. Today we're going to be talking about a key Fourth Amendment issue. I'm joined by Monica Crowley of the Trump administration, Distinguished Fellow Brian Griffin, Distinguished Fellow Peter O'Brien, and believe it or not, me as a lowly senior fellow am the one leading the discussion. So as tragic as that is, we're going to get right into it. Anyway, before we jump into it, please don't forget to hit that like button, share, subscribe, please comment, always helps the algorithm. If you enjoy our video here, please subscribe also to our patreon.com, Patreon Thought to Action. As a subscriber, you will receive early notifications and access to our videos, as well as be able to participate in our always popular Ask Us Anything question and answer sessions, which always get out of hand, I can guarantee it. And follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and our website, londoncenter.org. So without further ado, we're going to be talking today about what I believe is both a national security issue as well as an economic, I don't even know how to put when you do something so economically stupid, you're going to basically undermine confidence in the system of economics that we live under, undermine the confidence in your own government to do the right thing, and violate the Constitution, all in spectacular fashion. So it's the idea, the proposal of the Biden administration to allow the IRS to have access to everybody's bank accounts as if they don't already have it, but for the purposes of real-time screening, surveillance, if you will, of any transaction of $600 or more. Let me put that in perspective. If Richard Nixon had done this back in 1972, he would have been proposing real-time surveillance of $100 or more. Nobody can survive these days in any great degree without transferring $600 at least once or twice a month. So how is this legal? So that's what we're going to be talking about today as we go through this. So let's start with Monica. Monica, you served in the last administration. You have a good handle on the full spectrum of policy issues. What's going on with this $600 proposal?
Well, thank you, Tony, and it's always great to be with you and to join the London Center in any capacity. So thanks so much for inviting me. Yeah, I served in the Trump administration for about 2 years at the Treasury Department, and we all know that the IRS is part of the Treasury Department. So I gained a real internal view and understanding by being at the Treasury Department of what the IRS actually does. It is the most fearsome government agency for a reason. This proposal is part of the Democrats' massive reconciliation bill, which is not $3.5 trillion, it's more like $5 trillion in cost, contains this provision that, as you pointed out, is outrageous financial surveillance and a complete violation of every American's financial privacy. Right now, the limit for the IRS or the government agency to take a look at your transactions is $10,000. Democrats now want to lower it, as you mentioned, to $600. Now, just keep in mind, I get my hair done in New York City. It's an expensive proposition. I literally just went to the bank and took out about $650 so I could pay my hairstylist in cash and have some cash left over to buy incidentals and other things. If I had done that under this provision, if it gets passed and signed into law by President Biden, the IRS would know that I withdrew $650 from my corner Wells Fargo. What they want to do is they want to root out as much money as possible. They're going to go around and sniff into everybody's bank account, financial accounts for these transactions because they want to raise as much money as possible to help fund this multi-trillion-dollar fundamental transformation of the nation. So they want to increase the power of the IRS. Number one, by allowing them to root around in all of your accounts. And number two, by increasing the number of personnel in the IRS. Let me tell you, having been at Treasury, the IRS has plenty of people to enforce the IRS provisions and enforce the law and make sure that there are no tax cheats running around. They have plenty of resources to do that. So the argument that, well, we need to empower them to make sure that we track down all these tax cheats, that is simply nonsense. They want maximum financial surveillance on all Americans. It is part of this surveillance state writ large that we're all part of, but it is a massive violation of your personal privacy to spend your hard-earned money however you'd like. We're not talking about terrorists. We're not talking about Russian oligarchs doing dirty business. We're not talking about the Mexican drug cartels engaged in human trafficking. They're being watched. They're being sanctioned. No, we're not talking about bad guys. We're talking about average Americans who will lose all of their financial privacy if this in fact goes through. On the political side, Tony, just one last point.
Sure.
On the political side, the White House and Senate Democrats are really pushing this for obvious reasons. The House, it's a little less clear, and maybe someone else can speak to the politics of this, but it looks like House Democrats are not entirely persuaded. So we need to redouble our efforts to try to defeat the entire reconciliation bill, but in particular, this particular provision.
No, thank you, Monica, for that clear and very concise explanation of both the technical and political issues. With that said, one of the last times I saw this level of mass surveillance increase was essentially the analogy of this is Mike Hayden's increase in surveillance of Americans secretly back during the Bush years. And if you remember, basically Hayden figured we'll just collect everything, and that way if anything happens, we'll be covered. And it didn't work. The only thing, not a single terror attack was ever prevented, and it simply increased the access of our government to private emails, which, by the way, have been used more to trouble political adversaries of the administrations of the Obama administration than any defense against terror. So I see the same thing here. This is not going to do anything to improve surveillance of bad guys. It's going to do everything to increase pressure on individuals such as you and me and everybody on this chat to comply. Or in the moment you don't do something like they want, this is putting us towards the social credit system, which they want to use. So over to Bryan Griffin. Bryan, now I think this looks a lot like the Chinese social credit system, where basically if you there's a whole range of things you can do to basically displeasure the overlords of the Chinese government, and they come down on you. What do you think about this issue regarding our system and what the Chinese have done to their society?
Tony, I'm constantly concerned about the size and scope of government, especially as fewer people in Congress are talking about where we should have our limits. Look, our system was designed so that we have something called basically privacy rights. This is a massive increase in privacy rights. Now, if the Democrats' talking point is they're going to catch all this tax evasion and raise revenue, well, right now the media is reporting that the estimated revenue that can be raised based on this is about $400 to $500 billion. The annual federal deficit is $3 trillion, not to mention $27 trillion in debt that we currently carry. So we're weighing this kind of fraction amount of money versus a very large increase in privacy rights. I just don't think it adds up, and the Democrats really don't care about spending and having debt until it works for them politically. So we're all very concerned about this for the right reasons, and we're asking the right questions.
So just while we're on this with you, how is it that they could consider something like this when it's so clearly, in my judgment, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but it looks like it's a violation to me. This seems to go against every aspect of the Fourth Amendment. How would they even consider this in light of the Constitution?
Yeah, well, this is the way that government works. I mean, the government does something and then somebody has to bring it to court and say that it's a violation of their constitutional rights and the court can stop it. Of course, if courts become more and more politicized, that becomes less of a process of interpreting the Constitution and more of a process of who has the right judges in at the right time, which is a problem. But, that retroactive style, unfortunately, is what we have to rely on. So it's very well possible that this could go into effect and we could be living with this until we have someone who has the wherewithal to bring a charge and has standing in a federal court.
So Pete, over to you for a real quick assessment of kind of the technical aspects of what this all really means. Some of us in this chat have been victimized by the Obama era IRS, where they would do these Al Capone audits and basically do the same thing. Any movement of money was considered taxable, which is insane. So I see the same thing here. It's like if you move $600, you instantly have done something to justify coming under investigation. Am I reading that wrong?
No, and in fact, I was reading a couple of folks who were commenting on the bill, on the proposals, because the proposals aren't in concrete yet. But their interpretation of what has been put forward so far is that it will be aggregate movements of $600. So you move $300 to A and move $300 to B, you've now hit $600, you're reported. And for folks to get a grasp of this, we're talking about everything here. So you pay the rent, you're going to be reported. In essence, everybody will be reported. They will have access to all of your financial activity. And while for most people that won't matter in the main, this is, we were talking about this earlier, this is like something that is done in the Uniform Code of Military Justice, in the military, where there are a whole host of rules that are hanging out there that you look at them and say, geez, why are they there? But they're there because when someone does something wrong and they really want to hammer the guy, they drag in all the other violations that are sort of invisible on a day-to-day basis. And instead of getting charged with 1 or 2 things, you're charged with 12 or 13 things. If they want to terrorize, if you will, legally and financially, a certain number of people in the country, they can take very minute technical issues in your day-to-day movement of money, say that it looks like it's a violation, start you down the road. The next thing you know is you're getting charged, you're now hiring a lawyer, you're now draining your own bank account, on which they'll watch, trying to fight the IRS, who has, for all intents and purposes, an infinitely deep pocket, and you're going to lose that, and you're going to wind up like a whole host of other people who have been victimized by government in fighting law, so-called lawfare, against an individual of the state, a citizen, and you're put in the poorhouse just trying to hold off the accusations. So the possibility here is they don't even need to find you guilty. All they need to do is find that they want to terrorize you, and they can't. That's sort of the Pandora's box that's being opened here.
Well, often, as we know, Pete, in the military, the investigation itself is the punishment, even if they can't prove anything. It's just putting you down there. In this case, we're talking about financial loss and potential bankruptcy simply because they turn the eye of Sauron on you and decide that they're going to make an example of you. So, Monica, back to you real quick on this. We all know that often the political powers at play here, and that is the Democrats, have no regard for life. They don't care about actual supporting the Constitution. And to me, it sounds like from what Pete's saying and what Bryan's saying, that the people in charge have the potential of using anything you do, a transaction to go get your haircut, as you mentioned. That can be the one thing that you do anytime. And the moment that you say or do something that goes against the political elite, that is to say, those in charge, they can simply put an avalanche of pressure on you via simply opening an investigation. Am I missing something here? Is that something they could do within the context of what they're proposing?
No, it does look like they will be able to do this. This is a massive assault on individual freedom. You earn your money and you do it legally. You should be able to spend or save that money however you see fit. And now what's going to happen is the government is going to be involved in every single transaction that you make, down to, as Peter pointed out, $300, which, given the inflation that's happening, everything is costing more. So to reach $300 is a really, it doesn't require a lot here. So look, they are trying to leverage this. The Democrats talk about targeting Wall Street and tax scofflaws to try to make sure that they close loopholes and get every single little bit of money, every dollar flowing into the Treasury to pay for their massive fundamental transformation of the nation. But the people who are really targeted here and who are really going to pay the price, not just in terms of loss of their own personal freedom and financial privacy, but also in terms of their liberty, it's individuals and it's small businesses. It's not
Right.
Wall Street. Wall Street has plenty of lawyers to deal with all of this, not concerned about them. They're coming after us because they know this is where the real money is, the middle class. So for all of their rhetoric about targeting Wall Street and the so-called rich, making sure that they squeeze every dollar out of them and that they pay their fair share, they're actually really coming after us.
No doubt. Now, what I find ironic, Monica, you probably see the same irony here. I saw Bernie Sanders complaining how Amazon became rich over the pandemic. It's because the left used the pandemic to shut down the middle class. So the only place you could go get resources who had the capacity to deliver things was Amazon. So the very left that creates conditions to shut down the middle class creates conditions for the very people they now attack, saying they got rich because they did it. This is either part of a plan or something that is accidental. I think it's a plan. Bryan, over to you on this, because it seems to me this build back better thing that they're trying to do seems to be at the heart of a lot of this. Building back better and reinventing capitalism, to me, is just a dog whistle to essentially establish the Soviet Union over the top of us. What do you think on that?
Well, I think the nature of government is to grow itself. And this is what we're seeing happening here. I mean, this is like a step towards a nanny state, right? The parents watching the credit card charges of the child to make sure that they approve of the credit card charges. And look, of course, no one here is supporting tax evasion, but the idea is that you have to balance privacy, with these things. Let's take them at their word. They have legitimate reasons to try to understand what's happening because of tax evasion. These things have to be balanced. And just weighing these two things together, there's too much at stake in terms of individual privacy. And so, Tony, your question then is, well, what's the goal here? It's to increase the size and scope of government. The more data they have, the more they can regulate. The more they regulate, the more data they can collect. And the cycle goes on until the government is just so big, so unstoppable, and we have no idea who's making decisions over our lives anymore, that power is completely consolidated at the top.
Consider one of the response tactics that the IRS used against the drug lords. They put in the $10,000 limit years ago, and the drug lords responded by sending folks, they'd send folks to move money at $7,500, $7,500, $7,500. Now you got 20 goons going into the bank, each pulling out $7,500, every day, and they never crossed the threshold. Well, so the IRS started watching accounts, and you've seen this in movies, where the same account is getting hit for $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, 15, 20 times a day, every day. And so now they would use that as a justification to go and investigate that account. That would be the place where they'd put the can opener to try and get inside the organization.
Yeah.
If you lower that number to $600, now think about somebody who's taking out $200 a day out of their bank account. At the end of the week, you've taken out $1,000. And the IRS is now using the same tactic. The IRS can go back to you and say, what are you doing? The IRS now has justification to go and stick their nose in your business.
And don't forget, Pete, in 2017, the IRS officially apologized for aggressively scrutinizing, their words, conservative groups. So it's not like we're making this up out of thin air that the IRS would go after people for a political agenda. This has happened. They've admitted it.
And just one last point, the people who are going to bear the cost, the literal cost of this, are individuals and small businesses who are least equipped to bear the burden of this. If the IRS comes after you, you're going to need your accountant, you might need an attorney, you're going to have to incur all of those costs.
So this is clearly an existential danger to the middle class. And I think it's something that we all need to be concerned about. And I'd like to have us continue this discussion once we know what's happening, since no one really knows what the language is going to be. So anyway, thank you, Monica. Thank you, Bryan. Thank you, Pete, for being here today. And thank you all for joining us for this Thought to Action presented by the London Center for Policy Research. This is part of a continuing series where we bring important issues to the public and hopefully create both discussion and content that helps people understand the dangers that some bad policies, if they are put in place, will create for the American people. Please remember to hit that like button. Feel free to subscribe so you get the notification of our new videos. If you haven't already, please subscribe to Thought to Action via our Patreon, patreon.com/thought to action, so you get early access and submit questions for our Ask Us Anything sessions. Please like, share, subscribe on all the social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. And thank you again, the panel, and thank you again for watching us. And we'll see you again real soon with more important issues.